a human being could have watched that video and come away with it like that. So I want you all to understand, it's not every human being that will have that instinctive, empathetic connection with another on a particular kind of suffering.
We've been all way too quiet about it. We've been ashamed, and we all thought that this is going to be a disadvantage to us. And all of a sudden, I'm actually the one saying and speaking out loud, naming the possibilities that we have when we cooperate. And can you imagine what it is that we can achieve once we eliminate that racism part?
Especially public service positions and positions where you have any kind of decision making over people's welfare. Teachers, police officers, social workers, we can't have people with empathetic issues.
Run with this philosophy of with, not for. So it's about developing social impact projects that put the people who you seek to benefit in the driving seat, basically.
So this is our first behind the scenes where our expert guest has decided to stay, because our expert guest is also a member of U.S.A and also a member of our Global Challenges community. and we have that relationship off camera anyway.
What is Adam going to do?
I'm just rolling with it.
I love it.
We've already grown to over 1,000 subscribers, guys. Over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Yeah. And so I think I think with this show, we absolutely want to reach out and touch as many people as we can, because it is about inspiring people to become the change that's inside of them, and to really take action, to catalyze action, and to find their community, find people who are like them, who are not cynical. And I think that's part of, my reason for doing this. I come from the legal profession, and there's a lot of cynicism in the legal profession. And I always felt like different as a lawyer, because I was always looking to see, well, how can we change and how can we transform? And it was never only about how do I become the best lawyer, understand what the law is and become a transactional expert and that sort of thing. It wasn't always only about that. I was always like, but what does this law mean? And what is the impact of this law in society? And so, what should the law be? So it was more of, I've always had to be balancing that. And I think that makes you a little different in the legal profession, when you're not only focused on what the law is, but, try seeing the relationship between law and the reality that we have in society, and recognizing that there is that influence. And therefore, if we could transform the law, we could change some of our realities. And so, so it's about giving voice to different kinds of people and voices, so that people can feel that it's okay not to be like everyone else, and I think that's what our show kind of does. We're so different, all of us, different backgrounds from all over the world. And it's exciting to have conversations with people who are so different from you, and find that common ground, like Adam was saying in his conversation, find that thing that knits us together. And finding that thing that knits us together is about understanding ourselves and understanding our relationship with self and others better. Empathy. And so, yeah.
Margaret, you have been guiding people in very, very important decision-making positions. towards, even without them knowing it, but through what you've been doing with procurement law, the innovations you've been doing there, guiding people towards social impact without them even, being activists themselves, but the processes by which things happen. You've been working at that level, that very, very top level, and
Top
now
down,
you're
central governance.
just making yourself, you're making yourself accessible from the ground up as well. And
because it's a system,
I
right?
think I could
Top down,
speak for,
bottom up, side in.
from bottom up. I think perhaps I speak to more of the people on the ground up who probably see, people who are, legal experts, people like Anio, who's the president of the blockchain commission in Slovenia, as inaccessible and as, removed. And, people need to know that there are people at that level who are not, and that whatever grassroots activism you are doing on the ground, there is room and there is space for you in a community of people, and a lot of people who are, when you talk about cynicism, there are a lot of activists who are becoming very cynical, and or perhaps who they just like the idea of changing the world for the better, but they don't know that of any people who are actually doing it at the levels that you all are doing it at, and at the global levels that you all are doing it at.
You are doing it at too. Jessica.
Yeah, no, but you are. When the animations from Future Law Institute came in from response policy, the Global COVID Policy Response Initiative came in, mapping out what the correlations are between governance and policies and contraction rates and whatnot. I am like, I am part of this, really? I am well, not part of in actually doing it, but I am, getting to share in something so revolutionary that is, and I meet cynical activists all the time who are very, and there is reason too, because I work in marketing, and I work in, and we do a lot of public education work for U.S.A. and for the UN and for World Bank. Just this week, we had a proposal for the Juvenile Justice Reform Project for U.S.A. and the OECS Commission. And it can seem like, okay, there are all of these government agencies and international agencies doing all of these projects, particularly here in the global south and in the developing world. Where is the progress? Where, or after all of these interventions that they're doing, why is our society not, why do we still have all of this crime and all of this corruption and all of this disenfranchised youth and poverty after generation upon generation of UN intervention?
Yeah.
Where is
probably because we are only curing the symptoms, not ever going to the root problems. And this is why I love what, Adam, you were talking about, because going there, seeing the situation by yourself with your own eyes and seeing how things are actually being built bottom up, I mean, that really is how the problems are solved, where they start. And I think like every time we speak with people, it's almost like we want to surround ourselves with experts. We want to surround ourselves with those who actually have more knowledge than we do. And it almost sounds as if every time we want to do some changes, we feel alone. There's little people that have the capacity and the space and the energy to really dive into these root causes. And every time we meet people that do, we hear a lot about how important it is to find a cooperation, how important it is to actually have the team around yourself that is going to be complementary to your values and is going to be following your own objectives. And I mean, this is pretty much the call to action that we're doing right now, right? People that are watching all these, they have the ideas. And if you become a bit more vocal about it, we're just gonna double it. We're going to be reaching out to you, and we're going to be reaching out to hundreds of people. We do have followers altogether. If we merge powers, we have plenty of followers. It's just the exponential growth. So it's not only the pandemics that are growing, it's also the grassrooting projects like these ones that are growing all the time. So yeah, I mean, keep the positive hopes up. We're in this together, and we can do a lot together, just as soon as we start recognizing the efforts that are being taken and the power positions that we have. It's not only those people that have the Cockney London accent and whoever it is that actually presents the news to us. I mean, there's a lot of us that are in this for a change. We just need to recognize all the efforts that are being put in. Yeah.
And that's what this show is about, right? You know, putting a spotlight on all of these efforts and also bringing people in who want to contribute to making the world a better place. And I do want to say something, because one of the things that I feel really strongly is that there are a lot of people out there in the world who are very frustrated with national government, national systems of governance, and they're on the ground. They're experiencing a quality of life that is not, what they know that they should have based on the resources that a country has. They know that there should be a better way for us to live. Why are the poorest people the ones that are working the longest hours, not only within jurisdictions, but globally? Why is it the richest countries in the world from a resource perspective house the poorest people on the planet? And why, when we have this shared planet and all of these resources, and we have an abundance of food in one part of the world, do we still have people dying of poverty and not having enough to eat, and abundance of medicines in one part and people dying without getting access to those medicines? And I know there's a lot of frustration in the world. I have felt it. I continue to feel it. And what we are trying to do is bring you together with us. Come with us. Let us pool our expertise. Let us pool our expertise together. Let us learn from each other in a transdisciplinary way, in a trans-jurisdictional way, so that we can start to identify the gaps that we can work toward, as we've been doing in our Global Challenges Retreat community, where we are identifying certain gaps that we would like to contribute to. And so that's really the call to action here. Yes, you see us on this talk show, and I think you get to see a bit of our personalities here, but there's more beneath this. This is us talking to you, sharing with you some of the experts that we work with, some of the amazing change makers like Adam, who are part of our community. But there is so much more beneath just this show. There's so many approaches for us to support you, community meetings where you can come and participate and become a part of the change. Find your unique path to contribution. Yeah.
Send us more information. Adam, you as well, actually. You can definitely give us some of the information about who are the people that might want to share their own projects. I know that there's plenty of them.
Yeah, well, I know loads of people, and there's something called the Human Hive that has been set up as well, which is for change makers, and they run with this philosophy of with, not for. So it's about developing social impact projects that put the people who you seek to benefit in the driving seat, basically. So they are trying to form a network of people to share resources and things around those kinds of things. So it sounds like there's a good collaboration there, potentially some overlap. So yeah, got some ideas there as to, we could get some very inspirational people on board who have got their own approaches in different fields, who could come and share their stories.
Yeah, that's exciting.
When you were talking, Adam, about the essential sorry, go ahead.
No.
Yeah, when you're talking about the essential aspect of all of these initiatives, thinking about money and funding, and being self-sustaining, I think that is also key to, is I think one of the reasons why the problems never get solved by all of these NGOs and whatnot is because they are competing for donor funding with each other. And in order to access the donor funding, the justification must be that there is a problem. So if the problem actually gets solved, their careers are over. And
so there's a conflict of interest. There is a
conflict of interest in actually solving the problem.
Because I would like to see NGOs have in their governing documents, you know, an exit strategy. Because if you don't have an exit strategy, you're basically saying this problem is going to be here forever, and I'm going to be continuing begging for money to solve this problem, which is why at U.S.A, we've been attracted to not-for-profit initiatives. It's about how do you create an initiative within the system that creates value in a way that can also receive value from the system, become a part of the cycle and flow of the value. And Adam, sorry, Jessica, I just want to jump in because Adam was talking about Hive, and I think that's an incredible initiative and project. And there are many initiatives that are trying to catalyze social impact projects all over the world. But the reason why I wanted to jump in is because I really wanted to articulate what our USP is, if you want to use that word, that phrase. You know, I think one of the key things that makes U.S.A and what we're trying to do a little different is our focus on understanding the spaces that are gray. And so we see empathy as the tool for understanding relationships between two parts, so an other and yourself. And that other can be in yourself, it could be interpersonal, it could be in the context of the system. And because we have a laser focus on that, we develop programs and we develop programming to help entrepreneurs to understand those connections and understand themselves better. And so I think that's a really key difference in this sense. Because we are that way, we actually seek out diversity in our community. We actually love conflict and difference and in our community, because we see that as an opportunity to apply our tools and approaches to understand, you know, the system that's in place, the relationships that is in place better. And so, yeah, I think it's that combination, empathy and system thinking, that, you know, makes our approach a little different. And of course,
different, and that we set out to actually solve problems, not to justify our existence, you know, by continuing there to always have a problem to solve. We want to solve the problem, solve it, and be done with it.
Yeah, and so that's why that's a good example of one of the projects that has come out of our community is the Future Law project. We actually have in our collaborative governing documents that we are giving ourselves a 10-year mandate aligned with Agenda 2030. And at the end of that 10 years, we will identify whether there is still a need for the collaborative work in the way in which we were working before. And as of that time, we are open to transforming. We are also open to transforming every step of the way, but we're also going to take a huge audit of ourselves in terms of the goal that we set in 2030. And it may be that a new form is wanting to emerge at that time. And so we think that's how we should approach projects. As you say, you solve, taking responsibility for developing the systems to solve a problem. Yeah.
The clue is in the name, you solve, not you continue to help, you solve.
you solve, and
Yeah.
and the solution is you. And
Yeah. That's where it started at. Jessica, do you remember? Jessica, you were with me at the beginning.
I
It was first called The Solution Is You. TSIY. TSIY. Do you remember? That's when we were brainstorming the idea.
yeah, there was still TSIY. The solution is you.
The solution is you, because it started with understanding the individual as the first self. And if we are trying to help people to recognize that when you are caught up in your own anger at a particular system, what you're doing is you are othering the problem to a certain extent. You're saying someone else, when anger is attached to aggression and violence and bitterness and hatred, you are othering the problem, saying it. Why isn't the government doing more? Why isn't why are the corporations doing more? Why are these people this way? And all of that. And what we're trying to say, nothing is wrong with feeling that anger. Everything is right with feeling that, because if you are losing something that's deeply responsible, that you feel deeply responsible for, come on, what is the natural biological response to that? But what we want to help people to do is to see that, what do you use that energy for? You use that energy not to blame and to continue to other, but to turn inward and recognize, well, why does this matter so much to me? And how can I become a part of the solution to this problem? If it matters this much to me, that I have all of this energy, right? Then how can I participate in becoming a part of the solution? You know, we're not arrogant enough to think, oh, we are the only solution or the whole solution. We are all tiny little pieces that when we come together, we can contribute to pieces to the puzzle. And so it started with the solution is you, and then we shortened it to you solve, which is a statement of personal responsibility for your own pain. Taking responsibility for your own pain, your anger, your frustration, all of that, taking responsibility for it and saying, you know what can I use this for, to solve the problem for myself? Because it's giving you a problem. If you are feeling anger and frustration, you have a problem that you want to solve. And so instead of looking to others and outsourcing that problem solving, you know, to your government and to corporations, what can I do, you know, to heal personally, and also to, you know, use this, you know, what we call it in You Solve, the pearl, to produce your pearl in the world. You know, how do you produce your pearl? And I love that analogy, by the way.
I love this. I do believe that we'll have to do a new pitch for Patreon.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a Patreon pitch, but this is probably just a behind the scenes, yeah?
Yeah. I'm thinking of what is happening now, thinking of everything you're saying, Margaret, in the context of what is happening now in the United States with race relations. And I've been listening to Amy D'Angelo. She speaks a lot on as a white woman, the response from that end, and she talks about the difference between exactly that, just feeling, oh, I'm so upset about this, I'm so, you know, it's so horrible what's happening, it's horrible, and then the people who actually take action and they challenge racism where they see it in their space, or if they see a situation happening in front of them where it's happening, they intervene and they do something. And it is exactly that entire dissertation that she did is summed up in what you just said there, Margaret. The difference between just feeling, I'm just feeling angry, I'm just feeling upset, and doing something.
Yeah, but there's more as well. There's more as well with this anger thing, because a lot of us can instinctively channel the anger into projects, into doing stuff, and it's still unprocessed anger, right? So and I want to be really careful. We're not just saying run amok and be angry and do projects, even if the projects appear good, right? That's not what we are about in You Solve. It's about really developing a conscious relationship with your anger, because anger points us to that which we feel most profoundly responsible for. I remember when I met a teacher, Mac, right? Mac McCartney, and I think Adam was there, Jessica was there, Anya was there when he was talking to us in Oxford University. And he was talking about, he learned this stuff from these shamans, these indigenous tribe leaders about, you know, what makes, what, if you are looking for your path as a leader, what are the things that you would look for, right? What are the things in yourself that you are going to focus on? And he said, first, find that which you love, figure out what you love, right? Then he said, secondly, figure out what you're good at, right? What your skills are and all that kind of thing. And the third thing he said is figure out that which you feel most profoundly responsible for. And it is in the intersection of those three will come your leadership and your, you know, your unique path to contribution. If you all were there, you all would have seen the shift that took place inside of me, because in You Solve, prior to him saying that, we did it at the intersection of three things. At the intersection of, actually there's a fourth, but the three things that dovetail with his are, yes, what you love, yes, what you're good at, and third, what you feel angriest about. And then when I really sat with what he was saying, this wisdom from these shamanic leaders, it was like, but this is why I tell people to identify that which makes you angriest, because that points you, that's the methodology that you can use to identify, it's our methodology, sorry, that you can use to identify that which you feel most profoundly responsible for. What are you prepared to lay down your life for? What are you prepared to die for? That's what you're going to get angry about, right? And so if people can understand how sacred this energy of anger is, they wouldn't be wasting it on violence, bitterness, and hatred. They wouldn't, right? They would be like, sorry, I was just about to curse, and this is our show. You know? I don't know. Are we gonna? And they're gonna say, "Fuck." I mean, if this can point me to hidden truth about myself, and we are now looking at anger from a systems thinking lens as an emotion that actually communicates something that is happening at a subconscious level. Your conscious experience is anger. But really and truly, it is the language that our subconscious communicates to our conscious, that's something that we feel deeply, profoundly for, deep inside here, is not being met and needs to be met. And so, you know, once you start recognizing that relationship with your anger, you will no longer fear it. You will actually embrace it. I love when things like that happen, and when I'm triggered, because then it points me to something. It's pointing me to something, particularly when I'm triggered in a way that I haven't processed before. And I'm like, why am I getting angry at this? This is very interesting. And it's always rich when you start doing the conscious work with it. And I would say one last thing, particularly to people who have difficulties reading the headlines, because I 100% understand that. When I first saw this thing with Gordon Floyd, and I saw it come across my feed, you know, another guy died, died at the hands of the police brutality. I was going to do what I have developed, which I think many of us have developed, our own emotional survival practice of, you know what, not today. I'm not watching that today, because I know what's going to happen emotionally to me. I'm not doing that. I think many people do that. I was about to do that. And then I saw a picture of the officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck, and it arrested me immediately. And I'll tell you why. Because it's been years I have been trying to talk to people about this anger. where people are saying, Margaret, no, no, we think, you know, it's all about, you know, coming from a place of love and peace and joy but, you know, and I've been trying so hard to explain, guys, you know, it's two sides of the same coin, and it is a natural part of a human experience. And do you know what example I started to use? And this is why that George Floyd's picture really arrested me, and I had to look. I had started to do this just naturally. I said, listen, if somebody has, I don't know if you all have heard it, me say it, if somebody has a foot on your neck and you can't move, what you're going to feel. If somebody has your child, their foot on your child's neck, what you're going to feel. It's what I used all the time to really try to get people to connect to, oh my God.
Always use that expression. I know.
So when I saw this, I was like, what? Because, you know, I am, you know, doing the work on radical anger to launch that into the world and all of that, as you all know. And I'm in the middle of this, and George Floyd happens. And then foot on the neck. I said, I have to watch this. I have to watch this. And let me tell you what happened, guys. So I looked at it. That's why I told you all when I came into this conversation today, I was low energy, right? Because I've been processing something really, really deep on this George Floyd issue for me, right? And so I decided I would watch that video. And let me tell you something, that was one of the most traumatizing experiences, because I said, I'm watching it. I'm not looking away. I'm not looking away. And let me tell you all, it was so traumatizing. It was so traumatizing to me personally that I was like, oh my God, I am feeling this. And something just clicked in my head. We are doing all this work on empathy and mirror neurons. And, you know, there was the case study with the macaque monkeys where they put the fMRI machines on them. And when one macaque monkey was eating a nut, the brain lit up in a particular way. And the other macaque monkey, the researchers noticed, wait, his brain is lighting up in the exact same way when he's watching the other monkey eating the nut. And something really hit me while, you know, because after the video ended, I was in trauma. My body was in trauma. I was angry. I was in pain. I was like, what the F, right? And I was like, oh my God, we do so much work on what I would call vertical trauma. Trauma that we experienced, you know, we go into our childhood wounds and we're trying to, you know, figure out our childhood wounds and try to understand how that contributes to who we are today and how we are angry and all this. But how much work are we doing with horizontal trauma, empathic trauma, trauma that we feel? I know trauma that we're feeling based on the suffering of others. And that started to make me think, shit, no wonder Black and brown people, people of African descent, every time they see a police officer brutalizing someone that looks like them, there is this deep, visceral connection. And maybe it's not just African American people. Maybe it's, we have Adam and Anya in the room. Maybe you all feel the exact same thing. And but I know that for African Americans, what we feel is, it's very, very personal. It's almost like it's happening to us. And if that is what is happening, if there's that empathic trauma happening, the insight that I got is like, oh my God, no wonder we are angrier. Because more trauma is happening that we are experiencing. You understand? There
has to be an empathic connection, because I could tell you, I was watching it with Nick, and we were both angry, and we were both, you know, having that same
visceral connection.
And she's a lot more vocal than me with the expletives and the, you know, whatever. And I was saying before, again, with the Asian American community in the United States, the younger generation who they spent more time growing up with African Americans, indulging and experiencing and enjoying the same culture, the hip hop and the fashion and whatnot, and you know, adopting that culture as than any other. When these things started coming up, they started asking their parents, why aren't you feeling what we're feeling, angry like we're feeling? I think there has to be that connection, and where we were talking about that allyship, where you're seeing more people who are not African American saying, I am feeling it too, I'm feeling angry too. Yeah, when you said that you wanted yourself to take this up as something to solve, I got very excited, Margaret.
Oh yeah, because what I'm starting to see is, I feel like, yes, we all have the capacity to develop emotional empathy for the other. The research, the science is showing us that. Some of us instinctively have an emotional, empathic connection with others on a particular issue, right? And some people who, and that seems to cross ethnic and race barriers. So I'm not saying that only people of color would have that emotional, empathetic experience.
No, however, I understand.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm just, you know, I'm an extroverted thinker. So I'm actually thinking while I'm talking and I'm trying to work this out with you guys. And so I saw an article with this guy, right? A neighboring mayor had seen the video, and his comment on it was, but I mean, he didn't see anything really wrong. What really was the context? We don't know the context. He was probably resisting arrest, wait. And if he could say you can't breathe, then he obviously was breathing. You remember that?
Mississippi mayor, right. From Mississippi.
Exactly. And so when I sat with, I didn't get angry at him. I was like, wow, a human being could have watched that video and come away with it like that. So I want you all to understand, it's not every human being that will have that instinctive, empathetic connection with another on a particular kind of suffering. And the key question that we have to be asking, those of us working in the field of empathy and building empathic capabilities, is how do we reach, how do we create a bridge, how do we help those who don't even have a desire to connect with others, you know, build empathy?
That question.
Yeah, and I think it's an important question in the context of ethnic relations. You know, it really is an important.
But I should also say there are even, because people like Candace Owens and so on who will look at that video.
Yeah.
And also, and she is African American, and she would look at that video.
Yeah.
And try and justify it and see nothing wrong with it and whatnot. So, and I think I answered that question when you asked it. How do we deal with people who do not have empathy, who do not have that empathetic connection? And for me, I think the benefit that they derive from not having empathy needs to be removed, because we can't, to some extent, we need to look at where the gushing wound is, and we cannot allow this to continue. So therefore, if we're going to say we need to wait until we could convince, you know, these people who are bereft of empathy, before we protect people from the outcomes of that, we can't. So we have to make it something that is akin to having a severe deficiency. If you can watch something like that and not have empathy, people need to respond with, oh my God, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. You can't be in a position of power. You can't be a decision maker. When that Mississippi mayor says something like that, immediately people need to be like, we need you to step down. You cannot look at something like that and be in a position there's something wrong with
and
you.
Be in a position of power. But I hear you, but I don't know
of decision making or anything like that. You need to go and stop this problem.
Wait. Let's just not go too fast, because I actually do not think be calm, breathe in, breathe out. I know this might sound controversial and provocative, but I do not think there is something, hold on, wrong with someone not having emotional empathy for everything that I have emotional empathy for. Okay, so that everyone doesn't need to have emotional empathy for the same things, that because emotional empathy, and we are all here from U.S.A, so we know there are 4 capabilities. So people who are listening wouldn't even understand that we are making a distinction between empathy as a system, which has emotional, cognitive, compassionate, and systemic, and empathy, you know, as emotional empathy. And I am only talking about emotional empathy, which 9 times out of 10 is instinctive, right? And it's based on what we've gone through and in our life, our set of our nature and nurture, combination of nature and nurture, and what we've exposed ourselves to, that's nurture. And so I think for me, I was very, very surprised that the Mississippi mayor could have looked at that. I was shocked. He could have looked at that and come away from that, because I would have thought that George Floyd video was one of the most powerful sort of cross-cutting, ethnic boundary cutting sort of things we could watch. And so right. So there are right. So I think the approach is, we don't alienate people who don't feel instinctive emotional empathy. I think your point is that in leadership,
I mean, how could you not even have cognitive empathy?
Right.
Margaret, you're frozen.
Yeah, sorry.
In fact, sorry, Margaret, you froze in an unfortunate
you were about
pose.
to say something. Is it that these people went through some trauma? Because I wrote up that to be raised racist is actually an abuse, and it is a trauma.
So is a lot of things, right?
Yeah,
if you're eliminating or preventing a person to be to have freedom to decide what religion they're going to be. All the parents. I mean, there's a lot of documents now I'm seeing that people are sharing how white people can raise their kids not to be racists. And you'd be surprised. I mean, a lot of German people are still having undercovered racism, and they're still using it with playing cards. Like naming a person or a card Jew. We had a case with our students. We were playing cards, and a German goes like, "Here's a Jew." And the whole room was full of foreigners, and there was a Jew in the room as well. And we actually said it out loud, "Wait, okay, you're German, that's not appropriate." But to him, that was like the whole family, and he wasn't really racist. He wasn't having anything against Jews. It's just, it's part of their day-to-day life, and they're not aware of how inappropriate that might be whenever there's people around them that are not their families and that are not actually, just making it appropriate. It's not. And I see how much of a struggle it's going to be, even for me and for people that are not aware of how racism is a big thing. Here, we don't have people of color. We don't know whether that's a problem or not, because we don't have that issue. And yet we are raising people to have, notion of how diverse the whole world is and how we have to cooperate with each other. And the fact that I'm now having on Twitter public discussions that, thank you for coming up and raising the voice about that. I know that our profession is not allowing us to be vocal about that, but hey, isn't that a problem that brought us here in the first place? I'm like, damn, yes, it is. We've been all way too quiet about it. We've been ashamed, and we all thought that this is going to be a disadvantage to us. And all of a sudden, I'm actually the one saying and speaking out loud, naming the possibilities that we have when we cooperate. Like, can you imagine what it is that we can achieve once we eliminate that racism part? Can you imagine what we are going to do once we are going to be cooperating, knowing that you are of a different color, not saying that I'm not going to see a color, knowing that there is a different culture behind you, knowing that you have a different DNA, knowing how different you are and how
appreciating that.
complementing we can be.
And appreciating
exactly.
and tapping into the strength of the difference.
And I know that people are actually afraid of it, and they should be. I mean, yes, please be afraid of it, because you have no idea where this is going to lead. It's going to be amazing, and if you're going to be left behind, you are going to be left behind. You should be scared.
I'm with you, Anya, so much. I want it to be treated. That's why when I say I want racism to be treated as like if it is a deficiency, like if, you know, because until we, the people who still can get away with it, and for it, and it does not disadvantage them being racist. It has to start to disadvantage people. It has to start being seen as a character flaw, as something that disqualifies you from being given certain types of responsibility. It has to. Until it is, we won't get there, Anya. Where, you know, we want to move on from this.
But we're starting to get there. When you see Amy Cooper losing her jobs and other people are losing their jobs from, you know, doing racist acts and saying racist things, it is starting to happen. But it's about, I think
it can't just be over you're an evil person.
Yeah, no.
I want the person to recognize. It's almost like you discover I'm a drug addict. I'm a, you know, it's something I need to solve.
And go to a program. I agree 100%, because I believe we can build empathy. I've seen myself do that on many occasions, and I've helped other people do that. You know, I remember I used to not really have a deep emotional, empathetic connection to feminists and the feminist movement because of, I cited it earlier. And I remember you know what shifted it for me? I watched India's Daughter. I don't know if you all saw that documentary on this girl who was a medical student, just a beautiful medical student. It was the last day of exam. She finished her exam, and then afterwards she went to a cinema show with this guy who was not her boyfriend. They were just friends. They just finished their exams. Let's go to cinema. So she was going home late in the bus. She was in the bus with him, and I think he jumped out the bus. I'm not quite sure whether he jumped out. He left the bus before her. 4 men were in that bus. And the 4 men in that bus then dragged her, raped her, dug out her guts, took stuff out from inside of her. She died. She was killed. And it was because they were saying she was a slut, because what was she doing out late at night with men? And I was so traumatized watching this thing. I was like, no, so this is a real thing. And I have heard the stories before about, yes, women all over the world being raped and all this sort of thing, but just hearing the story is not enough. That's why I tell you can build empathy by video content, by stories being told in a visual way where you can connect, or written content, but stories properly told that show the emotional experience that the person went through, or you see what person went through. That's what builds empathy. So we do have a way to build emotional empathy, cognitive empathy and compassion empathy. Easier, because that's all in the head space. That's all about showing people data, statistics, and all that sort of thing. That you can build that easily. But the emotional empathy, it comes down to art. It comes down to art. That's why you media, the other project that has come out of the Global Challenges Retreat and You Solve, is about telling those stories that are going to build empathy for the other. And so
It's just got me thinking, because what you named, an example that you gave, I find it unimaginable to actually be able to put an put someone's insides out.
I
I
know.
find it like disgusting, but
I
at the
know.
same time, it gave me an opportunity to think what those people actually went through. Because to be able to do that, you actually need to crave blood. You need to crave the violence, probably even the pain. A lot of things that I cannot understand, we would actually need to open the opportunities to speak to those people that have done these terrible things. Because, I mean, take us back centuries ago, that was something that people did on a daily basis. That was something that actually history tells us it was violent. We've actually, as a civilization, became very, very civilized in a way. We are no longer killing each other on the streets and then putting all those beheaded bodies on display. We don't do that. But at the same time, I mean, we are not raised in that way. We don't crave those things. And yet there are people that are craving some sort of things that to me are, I cannot understand them.
Desensitized.
And
Yeah, but at the same time, you need to give them the opportunity to actually experience that in a different manner, be it art, or perhaps, you know, just open up a dead body and then do the exercise, do the research, do something with it. It's just like people that have anger in them or that have passion to fight. It's much better not to let them fight on the street with each other, but to enroll in, for example, boxing or stuff like that, just to release the energy, the vast amount of energy that is in their bodies. But first you need to really understand, well, what are they craving for? And then give them just another type of the opportunity to really express themselves in a similar way, but in an expected or accepted way that civilization actually supports.
There was an
empathy
article
for the
shared.
aggressor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Froze again. There's an article I need to share about, as Margaret mentioned, an Indian journalist who went into the Indian prison and interviewed rapists. Because India does have this problem, this huge problem with that. And it's a really interesting study on empathy and also on knowing that, because she spoke to some rapists, because there were some who they acknowledged, I know I caused pain, and I feel sorry. I realize it now. I caused pain. I feel sorry. There were some who they honestly did not know.
Yeah.
That this was something that was so bad. They were like, I didn't see what was so wrong about it. Why was this such a big deal? And they were made to understand this later. But there were some who were unable to be moved. And we need to understand there is some forms of human damage that take place, whether it takes place in the womb or in early childhood, that makes people be diagnosed with certain disorders where that is not going to be possible. That level, the transformation is not going to happen. They are psychopathic.
Yeah, so they're different. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, it's way too late to.
We can describe it as damaged, but it may just actually be how their brains were wired from birth.
Yeah.
So it's again about diversity of people, and we kind of through our laws and through rules and social norms, we are just saying it out loud to which extent we tolerate those behaviors, the diverse behaviors, and those we find very harmful for a broader society, we want to punish or at least a bit limit, so that we still have the society that kind of functions as a whole. But in certain societies, I mean, those harmful experiences are kind of tolerated in a higher level, and this brings us back to the legal discussion and how and why it's so hard to kind of create the standards on the international level, because we don't have like the common minimal denominator, or at least it's very hard to find it out. And even if we say, okay, this is it, then how are you going to explain that to billions of people that don't have that perception of a social norm? But yeah, it's all about a discussion of how much do we really want to support that diversity. We are now talking about sociopaths as something that is a wrong behavior, but at the same time, I mean, it would be wrong for us to just say, let's eliminate all those people. You are not like a person that we want to support. They are human as well.
Well, they might not be capable of emotional empathy, but they are still capable of cognitive empathy, and that's what has to be built. in their case, well, in everybody's case, but especially their case, because if they, for whatever reason, how their brains are wired, they're unable to connect on an emotional level, even with the most graphic of abhorrent situations, then we need to build that cognitive understanding so much more so that they can realize what they're doing is wrong. And it goes back to what you were saying, Jess. Got to take away the reward for being that way. Because at the moment, the people that rise to the top, oh, hello, President of the United States, are the people that don't have that emotional empathy. He does have cognitive empathy, though. You've talked about this before, Margaret. He has a lot of cognitive empathy, but it's the way he's using it. He's still being rewarded for having the cognitive empathy, but not the emotional empathy. Because the reward's there, he's going to use it for self-gain because he doesn't have that emotional empathy to think that there's anything wrong with that. So if we take away the reward, then he's going to learn.
Wouldn't it be great if we had an empathy-based framework for leadership selection and, whether that was part of the whole process? Because if we understand that there can be no society, am I lagging again?
A little bit.
You're back now.
Yeah, but there can be no society without connection. Just let that sit in for a bit. There can be no society if it's only one of us, right? So once there is another person with whom you have to connect, you are engaged not only with an internal process of understanding empathy for self, but you're dealing with empathy for the other. From the time we're in a society, it's what it is. And so proposing an empathy-based framework which recognizes, one, empathy for self, aligning disconnections within yourself. Two, aligning disconnections, understanding connections between you and the other. And then three, understanding the right response that you should take after understanding this in connection with the other. And then four, understanding collective empathy. What is the broader set of relationships? What is the impact of this in the context of the broader set of relationships? Because we are all complex systems interacting with other complex systems and interacting within a complex system. I mean, when you start thinking about it, your mind is blown. Our finite minds cannot begin to really grapple with the complexity of the human experience in the modern environment. Now that we even have the hyper connectivity with the internet, relationships are even more proliferated and complex. The people that we don't know are connected to us and influenced by us, and all of that to see. Then maybe an empathy-based framework for leadership, but just for being is important for every human being. Hear me, maybe. Isn't that what we're promoting?
Especially public service positions and positions where you have any kind of decision making over people's welfare. Teachers, police officers, social workers. We can't have people with empathetic issues, in those positions.
So that's our thesis statement today, right?
That's our. I love the separation of cognitive, emotional, the people who are probably sociopathic, psychopathic. It's pragmatic reasons they need for why they need to be, empathetic and perhaps intellect. So that's where your epistemological rigor, comes in, because it's one thing you have sociopaths, and then you have ideologies that endorse
that block
them doing what
ideologies
they do,
ideologies that limit empathy, that create blind spots, ideology, systems of privilege, and all of that would limit and create blind spots in empathy. That's where I think our work is exciting, right? Our work with empathy is exciting to address those blind spots, right? I couldn't say that what we are doing could help a psychopath, right? We're not qualified in that area, but those empathy blocks that come from religion, ideology, just your privilege in society, you can't see the other, or lack of interaction with the other, because a lot of most empathy, lack of empathy comes from a lack of interacting with the others. And so when I pointed out that one in myself with the feminism, I was just never exposed to anything like that around me. So the stories were very far away from me until I saw a documentary that brought me in close, right? And so it's about, there's a lot of work to be done in that space for human beings. There's so much work to be done in that space. There's so many things that people have different types of empathy for. We have to go. We've been talking, but this is, you know, I think of my husband, who is a British white male. He has now 3 sons who are very different. One is my big son, who is primarily of African descent, dark-skinned, deeply melanated, 6'4", beautiful man, right? 28 years old. We have Archie, his son, who is 21, white, blue-eyed, gorgeous, very intelligent, you know, doing really well and wonderful. And we have Jackson, who is mixed race. Piece of me, piece of Andrew. And I think about what a father in that position, what is required of a father in that position. Does that father, do each of these sons need the same thing? Given if we were to develop deeper collective empathy, like empathy for the system that they are operating in, isn't it that these 3 sons may need 3 different approaches and different, you know, development, right? And relationship with the father. And so I just think it's fascinating. There's so much work to be done in this area where one size doesn't fit all, and it's about understanding the other and understanding that all of us are unique and different. And I just say my husband has these 3 sons, but just hit me, but I have these 3 sons.
I was like,
what's wrong with me? I have these 3 sons, you know, and I have to, understand that it's different requirements for each of these. All of
that is possible because a lot of people who do this, I don't see color, and I don't see. Oh, we should just treat everybody equal.
We have to see. I have to see the color of my firstborn, of my secondborn, and my thirdborn. I have to see them. Yeah, I have to see the color. I done talk.
Okay.
I can't believe this. I can't believe you all have me talking so much. But once you start talking about anger and empathy, I go unclear.